I am Tom Bowman. I'm a consultant. I run a consultancy called Bowman Change that works on climate communications, and I am really fortunate to be able to moderate a panel with two really exceptional people. Heidi Harmon is the mayor of San Luis Obispo, California, an enormous city of 50,000 people near the central coast of California, and it's a city that has very ambitious climate mitigation and resilience goals. And also Chris Castro, who's in charge of climate and sustainability for the city of Orlando, Florida, which is a little bit larger and serves a larger metropolitan area that we all know about. I would like to start, since we're the third and final panel, by giving the two of you a chance to amplify or respond to any of the themes that really resonated with you or struck you in the two first panels, which were so good. I have a couple of questions to follow up from them with, but I'd like to give both of you a chance to speak to what's most on your mind. Heidi, would you like to go first?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me here today. I was a little bit distracted because of local concerns around our local protests and equity questions and inclusion questions and those types of things. And so I think so far of what I've heard, like just feeling more and more what has always been true is the interconnectedness is a word I kept hearing over some of the panels. I think that that has always been the case. And now I think we're all really feeling that in multiple ways. Climate, COVID, and racial justice are all really bringing that, I think, to the fore of our thinking. And so to me, that's one of my top of mind thoughts and mandates is to do what we can on justice of all types. And so environmental justice, racial justice, economic justice, gender, and all of those things feel interconnected to me. So that was one of my, I was glad to hear that pretty robust about that this morning.
Excellent. Hi, everyone. Great to be here with you. And thank you again to everyone for organizing and the prior panelists. I took away some really important nuggets, in my opinion. One was, I think, came from Vic, talking about the importance of the intersectional nature of this, how we can't solve the climate crisis just thinking in the silo of the environment, has to incorporate the racial and social justice component, as Mayor mentioned. Also, I love the point around change can be granular at the local level, and that grassroots actions actually do add up to significant impacts, especially when scaled. I think that there's plenty of work for everybody to do, and I took that away, and we need to approach this interdisciplinary. Everybody has a role to play. I also really liked the idea of decolonizing the science and that notion around moving away from dichotomies of did we reach 2% or not, and obviously life is not about that. And we need to realize that. And then the last point on plans, I really thought was well summed up by everyone, and that is that plans are absolutely critical. They inspire, they contribute to this collective framework, this vision that all of us can get behind, and we can, with the plan, find out how our talents and our expertise can help propel this greater vision for humanity. So those were some of the key takeaways I took.
Thank you. That's great. One of the things I'd like to follow up on, since you work both in city government, Heidi as an elected official and Chris as a civil servant, I think it was Ariana who was talking about the race often to jump from a conversation about what lived experience is like and quickly move on to an action plan, right? Let's have a community conversation, put it away, and let's get to policy making. And she was expressing, Ariana, I think it was you, I apologize if I've got that wrong, about the importance of lingering in that conversation longer so that we build trust, we build relationality, and we learn more before policies are made. How does that work for you in the city government? Are there pressures against that or pressures that allow you to do that more easily? And feel free, we're only three of us, so feel free to jump in as you wish.
Go for it, Mayor.
Okay. Well, I have recently come to see the problem with urgency or acting from this urgent place, which having been a climate activist myself for 15 years, it's really hard for those of us who understand that issue to set down that sense of urgency. And though I think it's important to note that this sort of panicked, sometimes a sense of urgency isn't necessarily helping and getting us to where we need to be. And so creating some spaciousness for those conversations to create meaning and to notice and to notice the unmeasurables. Like I feel like Chris was maybe alluding to that a little bit, you know, like especially in someone like Chris's position, a lot of times it's, you know, one data point after another, right? And when you're only focused on that, when you have a sense of urgency and you're using metrics to gauge progress, you miss so many other things. And so to step away and notice that a lot of the things that can't be measured are actually the most important things. And to create this spaciousness for meaningful dialogue, I think goes a long way to creating that connection and that community of care, I think that we're all really striving for, that can invite new people in for the long game that it's going to be a part of the solutions to climate crisis.
Yeah, those are really important points, Mayor, and I agree with them. You know, in Orlando, and I'm sure in many other places, we see this as a journey, not a destination. This is something that everybody's on a different place in that journey, and that the co-creation of how our cities are going to move forward, given the epic proportions of urgency that we do have to address climate, is going to be critical. We rely a lot on our community-based organizations and nonprofits to be the boots on the ground and the ears on the street to help us better understand how to do government better. And too often I think we rely too much on government to solve this problem. And more we're seeing that some of the innovative solutions to address climate, both at the local and global level, are coming from grassroots-based organizations. And they're coming from ideas that students have and that others are trying to put into play. And government here is trying to accelerate more of those. In any of our climate and sustainability action plans, we've done a significant amount of community engagement, really trying to prioritize voices from frontline communities and communities of color. And those aren't just buzzwords, those are important for us as we move forward in this greener future, that we're not leaving anyone behind the way that we have in the past. And so certainly meaningful engagement with the community's cornerstone.
That reinforces the lot that we heard in the first panel, that when the metrics are all top down, we're always looking for the big chunk of mitigation and failing to see that the actions of the people who live in the communities add up to significant mitigation. But is that hard to do in the context of city government? And I'm asking this question mainly because I'm interested in how that intersects with an ACE agenda, with an Action for Climate Empowerment agenda, with your stakeholders and constituents.
Also, maybe I'll start on this one, and I'll say, yes, it is hard to do. I mean, in some respects, we have this urgency where we're hearing from the public that we need to act now, and that we need to make bold commitments and begin to transition investments from certain parts to others in order to accelerate this work. And the reason why I said this is a journey, not a destination, is because it's not just a one time that we're going to hear from the community and then develop policy and move forward. This is an iterative process. And for us, we're updating our plans every 5 years at minimum. And every single time we're going back out to the community to figure out, what the priorities are in our current state, and how do we continue to incrementally move towards this greater vision of being cleaner, more equitable, more sustainable in our city and beyond. So it's certainly not easy, because you're balancing those, pressures of quick wins and bold commitments with meaningful actions that will empower our communities to take action on their own in their own lives, within their own businesses, and at the same time make sure that we're not leaving anyone behind.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is difficult. I think especially coming from a municipal perspective, which has a lot of different types of intelligences, but emotional intelligence isn't usually a city's strength. And so there's tension there, I would say. And I would say there's a little tension there in even just someone like myself as an elected person and as an advocate for this issue, and the difference between the way I engage on it and like the city officially engages on it. And, you know, I'm a big proponent of creating, you know, these community bonds around these issues at the same time. But the infrastructure, the logistics, the resources that it takes to have a full program to, you know, do a community oriented, hyper local neighborhood kind of leadership building, those are some pretty significant resources. And cities, I think, are traditionally pretty hesitant, especially the size of mine, which we don't have a lot of resources. You know, that's a little bit different of an approach than a city might normally have. And so we have a long way to go. I would say we have a lot of support in our community, but we still have a long way to go in terms of really doing, I think, a lot more of that community, slower connection building type work. Because let's also be clear, we're not just talking about getting consensus around climate action. What we're really also talking about at the same time is building those bonds that will withstand the coming storms, literal and figurative, right? And so that's something that I'm very interested in. We have to do, there's a lot of parallel paths happening at once right now, so we can create communities that turn towards each other and not on each other if and when things really get more difficult.
Well, Heidi, do you have natural allies in your community for this kind of effort that you're talking about? I know you have a major research university in town, but you have a business community, you have community groups, you have education institutions, etc. Do certain kinds of groups provide sort of the I want to say the fertilizer, you know, the kind of support and the kind of activity that supports this kind of work, or is it really come down to individual people?
I think it's both. I think we have a lot of individuals, so to speak, that are very much interested and supportive of this issue. And in my city, I'm in a more progressive donut hole around with a more conservative county around us. So the city of San Luis Obispo, I would say the community here is largely in support. Like, it's a given that we're going to be focusing on climate. There's no real strife around that. Although when it comes to specific policies, there, for example, we just recently moved to decarbonize buildings, right? So move away from natural gas. There's opportunity there still for fossil fuel industry to come in and cause some strife. That's my opinion on how they handled that. So there's still some fertile ground for strife on this topic, but mostly we're all on the same page to some extent. And yes, the university and the business community here, we see ourselves as sort of a blossoming clean tech hub and innovation entrepreneurial community. And so our ambitious carbon neutrality goal and all the programs that we're doing and committed to, I think, is a fertile ground to establish ourselves as that sort of hub here in California. And so I think we get both explicit and implicit support from the business community in that regard.
Yeah, similarly in Orlando, you know, we tout ourselves as kind of the partnership city because a lot of the ways that we've been able to excel in some bold visions for Orlando have been through collaborations and partnerships. Starting with our residents and community groups. We have a coalition called the First 50 Coalition here in Orlando that was started out by the League of Women Voters and NAACP, Sierra Club and others, and now we have Clio Institute and Ideas for Us and so many other organizations that are organizing themselves to essentially put pressure on myself and our mayor and our city council to move us more in a sustainable direction. And in addition to the First 50, of which we collaborate and meet with regularly, we also very much rely on our relationship with the utility. I don't think any city in the country or in the world is going to address the climate crisis meaningfully without a strong partnership with their electric utility. Knowing that in cities, at least for major cities like Orlando, over 70% of our greenhouse gas emissions citywide are associated with buildings using dirty energy. And so we need to really start to, you know, find new pathways that can support our electric utilities in helping to make this transition to a cleaner and more renewable future. And that's something that we've, you know, really been able to do with our hometown utility OUC, but also our transit authority links with electrification of buses, our university UCF with the Florida Solar Energy Center, and a lot of the research that they're doing on clean technologies and so on and so forth. So I do truly believe that how we're going to solve this is through those types of unconventional collaborations and partnerships. And there's a couple of good examples here.
That's really helpful. It's really helpful. Heidi, the last time we talked, you mentioned, you talked about being a mayor in a time of severe crisis with COVID and unemployment and issue fatigue, and how that intersects with your climate agenda. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, I think that seems to me anyway, one of the biggest challenge in this moment is that even somebody like me who is incredibly passionate, and it's the issue that motivated me into politics, is climate change. You know, thinking about it in this moment, I just feel like, oh my gosh, that too, you know, and especially, you know, we've had protests almost every day or every other day for the last couple of months, every other day, a couple times a week at least. Obviously, COVID and the deepening economic challenge, the governor of California just said that we can't use any school properties for any kind of childcare. So the whole community is now without access to childcare. You know, like all these things keep stacking up, and it would be easier than ever to just feel like, okay, we're going to have to take climate action and set it aside. And I do know, and I know I heard this earlier from some other folks, that, you know, there's communities that are having to pare down their climate action plans. And I think we're going to be looking to do that as well, which is heartbreaking to me, if understandable. And so I think, for example, I can't really imagine, I think the community would feel offended or uncared for on some level if I went out and try to do a big push around climate action right now. So I find that to be incredibly difficult to navigate. And that's where maybe an organization like yours would be quite helpful in helping people like me and maybe people like Chris message in a holistic way that helped people feel heard and held in this COVID uprising moment, while we also remember that we need to keep moving forward on climate action. I don't know what the answer is, Tom. I'm hoping you do.
We'll ask Chris.
Well, you know, I think on our end, you know, COVID has, in some sense, helped to spotlight how interconnected these things are, right? And health has now come to the center stage, showing the interconnectedness of the triple bottom line: the health of the environment, impacting the health of our community, impacting the health of the economy. And I think as we look to economic recovery, and this is something Mayor Dyer has been actively a part of over the last couple of months, and trying to position a national recovery around green and equitable economic development. You know, from the get-go, we've identified that moving towards the green economy is one of the greatest economic opportunities of the 21st century. In Florida, fastest growing job the last 3 years has been a solar panel installer, in addition to 12 other states. In Orlando, we've more than doubled solar contractors and energy efficiency contractors in less than 2 years. These are the types of jobs that are helping to improve our infrastructure, helping us to also minimize carbon pollution, and at the same time, ideally, you know, bring back our community in a stronger way. And so I do think that with the crisis comes an unbelievable opportunity for us to pivot. And we don't get many of those pivot opportunities the way that we are currently in many lifetimes, let alone the current state. So, you know, it is very difficult. We don't have a solution for it, but certainly a green and equitable recovery is something that we need to continue to center in our messaging and in our actions in local government.
Tom,
well, thank you for speaking. Yes.
That reminds me what we were kind of chatting about yesterday, getting ready for this call, is that that's what COVID has really shown us, how possible all these things are without a lot of bureaucracy in the way. And, you know, we've taken back our streets and created this whole parklet system for restaurants to move outside. We did a lot of that in literally 24 hours. And so we are, I think, creating a culture of maybe some more open flexibility and kind of precedent setting approaches to things that we haven't seen, at least in my lifetime as a mayor here.
I thank you for speaking to this issue, both of you. You know, one of the things about climate change that's so challenging is that it tends to compound pressures, right? It's never just one impact. It's all these impacts at once. And so part of creating resilience is being able to manage all of this and create a culture that moves us forward. So thank you so much for your contributions this morning.